Vision started from Nehru. Imagine a prime minister saying we have police to look after the army's duties. I think it still continues. I'm not surprised that we don't have a vision. I think we never put it in place. Whenever we had a crisis, we got going. So we had the 1962 crisis, so we got going. Then we slept, and then the 1998 crisis of Kargil happened, so we got going. A vision was probably never there. As you rightly pointed out, we have a great bureaucratic maze. Imagine if it takes 8 years to place an order for canvas shoes. I think the wives in the houses are more efficient. It takes them half an hour to buy a pair of canvas shoes for the children. It can't be so bad. It probably has to do with the fact that the founding fathers never gave importance to India's security needs, because those fathers probably had some different visions of what India is, which started from Hindi Chini Bhai Bhai, not knowing that the Chini was the worst not Bhai. But it continued. From our perspective, it is a matter of a vision with money to spend on. I do remember I was passing through a district near Chicago, I think in 2002. There was one huge army cantonment, whatever they call it, which was closed. They said that George Bush wants cuts. But when I went there about 2 years ago, it was vibrant and with activity. It was back to its old glory. I think it's a vision that never got driven in this country. And if every time we need one attack on the door to start waking up, then it's a real sorry state of affairs. And the sorry state of affairs, if you actually note, is already there. 40% of India's territory suffers from internal insurgency of the Maoists. 40% of our territory. 10% of our territory is actually occupied by either China, Pakistan, or Bangladesh. 50% territory not in our hands. I think the lack of vision, the lack of decision making, the lack of not being able to place orders on time is playing havoc. I have a few questions which have come, which is meant for Sandeep. May we request you? Bhavesh asks, Bhavesh Savla, recently Gujarat announced defense manufacturing policy. Have you studied it? Do we have a national one? Defense manufacturing policy.
Well, there is a defense manufacturing policy. It's called the DPP. It's in the Ministry of Defense, and it's updated every 2 years. But the problem is that the defense manufacturing policy of the country is so tilted towards the public sector that it's all about the 39 ordnance factories, the shipyards, the defense shipyards, the BEMLs, and the Bharat Electronics world. The private sector is kept completely out of the picture. I mean, you cannot hope to achieve the kind of goals that we want. Right now, the mix is 70-30. 70% of our defense requirements are imported, 30% are made indigenously. The goal, which is again this long-term thing, which without any clear definition, it's like the Hindi Chini Bye Bye slogan that, oh, we want to make it 30-70, but nobody is given a roadmap of how we're going to go about it. So it's just, again, sloganeering. You cannot achieve 30-70 without getting the private sector in. To reverse this from 70-30 to 30-70, you need investments to the tune of 100,000 crore rupees. That is half our defense budget every year, year on year, for at least the next decade. Where is this money going to come from? I mean, it's certainly not the public sector that's going to put in this money. And we are where we are today because of public sector inefficiencies. It's time to get the private sector on board. I mean, again, it comes down to this lack of vision. We have at the helm for the last 6 years a person who's very nice. He's very, very personally non-corrupt, of very high integrity, but is unable to articulate a strategic vision. He's just left the armed forces, let them do what they want. I mean, political leaders they're not supposed to just sign files. They're supposed to set long-term targets. Like, look, I need indigenization of the defense forces in the next 10 years or the next 15 years. But we don't get that. You know, a couple of years back, I was told that there exists something called the RM's directives. The RM is the Raksha Mantri. The RM's operational directives to the armed forces. We don't have a white paper also, incidentally. I thought this was it. This is what the defense minister tells the armed forces, that this is what I want. I was a little aghast to discover that the RM's operational directives are actually sent up by the armed forces themselves. to the defense minister. He looks at it, he probably corrects the language and sends it back to them. And they pass it off as the word of God. This is what the defense minister has told us. So again, it's like this thing of, the horses are tied to different parts of the cart and they're all pulling in different directions. There is no clear vision or no clear policy. If you let the armed forces manufacture your strategy, their only thing would be to arm, rearm, and what happens is that arming becomes an end in itself. There is no larger vision, no strategic vision, so every armed forces says that we need to get so many tanks or so many planes, or the Navy says I need so many warships. There is no larger vision that gets all of them onto one platform, which is what the US and many other countries of the world have done. I hope that answers your question.
Sandeep, I have a question.
Sure.
The Pentagon is very open on the defense policies, pretty open. I'm aware of this. Do we have a culture like that in Delhi?
No, we have a culture of total opacity. Like Mr. Prabhu said, 15% of the government spend is accounted for by defense, but I don't think even 15 minutes of parliament time is spent on discussing the defense budget. And in South Block, it's this culture of secrecy, there's complete opacity. So the reason you have scandals like the helicopter purchase is that everything is done in such a hush-hush manner. People are not told anything. There is this complete thing of secrecy. If it's defense, it must be secret. It must be kept under the table. And when it's kept under the table, that's when all these procurement scams and all that break out. Because there are people who make money when things are kept under the table.
Thank you. Two questions, common questions, Ashish Kulkarni and Aditya Gore. They ask, can you throw some light on the internal security status, which is to do with the book you're writing? As we continue to live under the threat of bomb blasts every day, are there any measures taken for center-state cooperation on this aspect, and what is today's state?
So internal security, that's a whole new different ballgame. I mean, the basic problem here is that law and order, as per the Constitution, is a state subject. So the center leaves the states to do what they like. And the one the one area of the budget that the police, the states completely neglect is the police forces. The successive year after year after year, police budgets are unspent, policemen are not hired, you don't have boots on the ground. You have, what, 250,000 of policemen? The kind of shortages that you're talking of is astounding, it's huge. You should stop waiting for this NSG, this so-called mythical commando force that will fly down from the skies from Delhi to deliver, justice and vendetta on terrorists in different states. That should end. I think we should start developing regional, local capacities. If there's an attack in South Mumbai, I mean, why should the NSG have to fly in from Mumbai? It should be Colaba police station. A small anti-terrorist unit of the Colaba police station should handle it, or the police headquarters. Yes, sir. NCTC, yes, that again is gone into this entire cycle of getting consensus, because the government is unable to get consensus. There are so many powerful states, every state is opposing it. And then meanwhile, the IB has jumped in and they're afraid that the IB is going to become a super IB. The IB is going to get arrest powers, is going to be misused by the governments, by the central government against states. So some of these are not entirely unjustified, I must tell you that, because there has been a historic, there have been records in the past to suggest that the government has actually misused central police forces and powers against the states. So there is this traditional mistrust between the center and the state. But something like this shouldn't come in the way of, when you're fighting terror. And why is it that we, after 5 years after the Mumbai attacks, I mean, you walk on the streets, you still don't have CCTV cameras. I mean, how much does it cost you? I mean, this is exactly like the analogy of the army unable to buy combat boots. Why can't you put up CCTV cameras? I'm sure it wouldn't take more than 6 months for you to get, for a vendor to come and, install them. So what are the forces at work here that are preventing us from equipping ourselves or training ourselves? Yeah, well, there you have it. Under the table again.
Sandeep, after 9/11 in America,
right,
we had the Department of Homeland Security,
yeah,
which our experience shows the public is more compliant than even the enforcers. In India, I think we had NIA.
Which is one of the measures that was suggested. You had a couple of organizations like the NIA, the NATGRADE, the NCTC. NIA was the easiest to do because it came under the center. They could, create it very quickly. And this is how the Indian system reacts. Whenever there's a question of setting up a new organization, overnight there's a new organization, because it means so many more posts, it means turf, it means power, it means influence and all that. But when you talk of cutting back or, scaling down or pooling in, sharing, that's when there's the problem of, So that's why you have organizations like the NatGrid, which haven't taken off. You have the MAC, which is a multi-agency center where intelligence agencies are supposed to sit around a table in North Block every day and share intelligence of whatever little stuff that they get. They're supposed to pool in. There's a huge reluctance to share intelligence there.
You have Mr. Mahendra Vora writing, Sandeep ji, great R&D and information. We all may fall in depression after your speech. I hope you don't.
Yeah, I hope you do something after that. And that's like, go out and, tell the government how angry you are. Or tell your MP how angry you are.
He writes further, I wanted to know more about how are we spending on the Moon and Mars mission? Why can we use some for defense expenditure?
Yeah, that's interesting. The Moon and Mars is part of ISRO. Now, there are 3 organizations which have been put under sanctions after the Pokhran blast of '98. DRDO, the Atomic Energy Commission, and ISRO. The DRDO and AEC have not really recovered. But ISRO has shot out of orbit. They've gone to the Moon. They're going to Mars next. Precisely because they've had a vision. They've engaged the private sector. They do the design. They do a lot of the designing stuff. But the procurement is from the private sector. There's huge public-private participation in ISRO. And it's actually a success model that other government organizations like DRDO and the Atomic Energy Commission needs to look at.
Mr. Bhandari has a compliment for you, Mr. Desai. मातृभाषा ही फिन्स की तेजस्विता प्रदान कर देकर देश का उत्तमोत्तम कल्याण कर सकती है. उदाहरण जापान और चीन. Compliments for Finns.
I think Sunil wants to say something. You want to say something?
I just want a couple of points to be discussed.
Please. You can take this.
One is about, I think.
So Sunil Bhandari is an economist.
No, essentially, I think it comes from the. Okay. Thank you. No, the points which I wanted to make were essentially from the defense budget side, because I think you said that roughly about 14,000 crores cutback has been there in the revised estimates or the budget estimates.
Yeah.
And why does defense minister wants to surrender 10,000 crores of allocation of capital expenditure? Okay. Now I have an issue because when he provides for the next year an additional expenditure, 14% growth, whatever, he also says that it is now left to the ministries and the departments to find how they can absorb this money.
Right.
Now, is there a problem with the defense ministry to how to absorb the money? Because across the ministries we find that they surrender the allocations which are given for the budget. So is there a problem about the defense minister's capacity to absorb the allocations of money? Or is it that the finance minister makes that as an excuse to reduce the allocations for various ministries, including defense?
I'll tell you, there is a problem of absorbing this money. It's because our processes are so cumbersome that we're unable to spend effectively in a budgetary cycle. And there have been attempts in the past to set up this non-lapsable defense fund that, all the money goes into that fund, and from there you use it to pay defense acquisitions, which is not very, sound financial accounting. I mean, it doesn't make good financial sense. But the problem is that the armed forces are very often unable to buy equipment in time. The reason why 14,000 crore was surrendered this year is because the Gorshkov delivery couldn't be taken this year. It's gone off by another year or so. So that money was kept aside for that. And the army said, look, we are just going to buy 197 choppers, so please keep some money for us. They were unable to do that because of some scandal or the other. The problem again is this, you're unable to streamline your acquisition processes. The Air Force and Navy by and large don't have a problem. It's actually the Army which has a serious problem of trying to spend its money. It's, they go wrong at the very beginning of what is called a GSQR, a General Staff Qualitative Requirement, where you frame this thing and you say, look, this is, I need a chopper or a assault rifle. They don't do their homework very well, and a lot of times that these proposals actually collapse. When they come to the final stage, they just drop down dead. A simple example I'll give you is this: few years back, there was a requirement for a sniper rifle. The army told the government we need sniper rifle, 1,000, 2,000 of them, and no global manufacturer responded to this tender. And the reason being that they had said in the tender, we want a bayonet to be fitted on the sniper rifle. Now, a sniper is someone who sits 2 kilometers away, you know, like that. And they wanted a bayonet to be fitted. So I asked someone who I knew was part of this process. He said that, why did you, put this thing? He said, oh, that purana hamara jo tha, uska tha. So we just added on the thing, He said, bayonet. And then the manufacturer said, so 5 years have been wasted in that. 4 years, 5 years. A lot of these things collapse. The army, unfortunately, they mean well. They don't put their best people in acquisitions. How it works is when an armed forces are at war, the finest guys are in your operations side, DGMO and MI and those branches. When you're in